But let me share my screen. And as I said, welcome to anybody here on the replay. I might even put this or part of this up on YouTube. We'll see. I learned the skill. I like to learn something new every week, if not every day. And I recently learned the skill of downloading Zoom videos and putting them on YouTube. So that's a possibility. Roth Riches. We're talking about tax-free retirement income today. Is anybody excited about paying taxes? No, no. Okay. Especially when we hear some of the wasteful things that are done with our taxes. So I like tax-free income. I like that idea a lot. I've done a little investing in a Roth IRA, and I like them. So we're talking about tax-free income potentially for life. And let's just start with a basic definition. What is a Roth IRA? And I'm going to make that a little, I think that ends up looking better on the screen when I have it be a little shorter there. There we go. A type of tax-advantaged individual retirement account to which you can contribute after-tax dollars. So Roth IRA comes from two words. IRA means individual retirement account, and Roth comes from the late Senator William Roth of Delaware. He was a Republican. He helped create the Roth IRAs. They were introduced in 1997, and the Taxpayer Relief Act of 1997, signed into law by President Bill Clinton, established Roth IRAs. So it was a bipartisan effort. And IRAs had been around already for a little while, but this established a different primary change is a different taxation, although there are other changes, and I'll go through those as well. I'm also going to talk a little bit about differences between IRAs and 401ks, just so we kind of have like the lay of the land of retirement accounts. But the big difference is how they are taxed. And then the most simplest way, traditional IRAs, you get your tax break now. Roth IRA, you get your tax break later. And unfortunately, sometimes people think that when they are getting that tax break with the traditional IRA, they don't realize that it's actually a deferral. Maybe we shouldn't even call it a tax break, but I did like this graphic. It was just so nice and simple. But you get a tax deduction for your contributions, and you pay no taxes until you take distributions. And with the Roth IRA, you contribute after tax funds, and then the distributions are tax-free. So interesting question, for myself, and maybe, the answer would be different for you, but when I think, when is it easier to pay taxes? Would I rather pay taxes while I'm earning, while I'm working, or when I'm retired? To me, I think I'd rather pay them while I'm earning. If you're an employee, I'm self-employed, so I have to, pay my own taxes. But if you're an employee and taxes just sort of get automatically, like you get your after-tax income, then it's almost like you don't notice that money because it's not there to spend. And to me, it's like, you always find the way to pay for your taxes. And then I like the idea of money growing and not having to think about it. Kim Butler, who I worked with for a lot of years I was a writer and she was an advisor, kind of a financial thought leader, and she told me that when she worked with people, that it was not unusual for people to be blindsided by the amount of taxes that they were going to pay in retirement, especially if their accounts had done well. And it's kind of a funny thing where, like, if you invest consistently and you max out your 401k and you do all the things, and you don't have to pull the money out because of emergencies or unemployment or divorce or all the reasons why people end up pulling money out. If you succeed, then you get punished. The more you succeed, the more you get punished, because your 401k, and people will generally have 401ks when they're with an employer, and then they can also have traditional IRAs. Traditional 401ks and traditional IRAs have the same taxation. Usually when people retire or leave an employer, they'll move that 401k into an IRA. So we're just talking about traditional retirement accounts here, but they create this tax trap. And if you've ever seen like the monkey trap, where the monkey has to reach through the bars and grab the banana, but then once they grab the banana, these bars are too close and they can't get it's like a box and they can't get it could be bars, it can be a box, but literally that is how they trap monkeys. And I always think of the monkey trap when I think about 401ks and traditional IRAs, that the more you succeed, the more you will be punished. And as we went through in the retirement revival, that people are sometimes surprised. I was surprised, I think, to realize like, oh, if I've got this retirement account, and we talk about how great the tax break is going to be. Of course, you get the tax break now, but then you pay later. But you pay at the earned income amount, which is really the highest tax rate that is available. Whereas if you simply put money into a brokerage account, not in a retirement account at all, you would end up with lower taxes in most cases, as long as you're holding that investment for more than a year. If it's less than a year, you're going to have this, assuming you have gains, you're going to pay the same taxes, earned income, on that short capital gains, but on the short term, but on long-term capital gains, it's typically going to be a lower rate. So it's interesting. We get kind of lured into, that's why I think of it as the tax trap. That when Uncle Sam and Mr. Wall Street shake hands and it's all for your own good, dear taxpayer, I question, is that really, what are the downsides there? What is it that they're planning and scheming? And what they're planning and scheming is that perhaps you are actually going to end up paying typically more taxes in terms of the dollar amount that you're paying, because of course you're going to have gains. So it's a way for the government to take advantage of the stock market without having to invest in the stock market. They let you keep some money and put it in the stock market. You grow the money and then you pay them more in taxes. So it's more in the dollar amount, but it's also more in terms of I just lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was going with that. Okay, I'm moving on. I'm going back to the notes. Brain is, I don't know why I do these in the morning, because my brain doesn't fully wake up until 1 in the afternoon. But other differences besides taxation, how much can you contribute? Who can contribute? And this is the difference I'm talking about: Roth IRAs versus traditional IRAs. The rules around withdrawing what you can invest in can be different. That's really more with 401ks, the costs and the fees. Those are some differences that we will look at here. So Roth IRA contribution limits, these are for 2025, unless the internet is lying to me, which sometimes it does. So always double check, and you could be listening to this, who knows, in 2026 or even later, and there may be different. Typically, we see this bump up by about $500, every 2 or 3 years. So it has slowly but steadily increased. So right now, if you're under 50, $7,000 per year, I guess I should indicate that is per year, is your limit of what you can contribute. So these are not big accounts. Over 50, you can contribute 8,000 per year. And that may or may not sound impressive to you, but it can add up. And even for this, when people are maxing out their 401k, oftentimes they are doing so with much larger amounts. But even with very modest amounts, this can add up. So I'm going to go to handy dandy calculator, investment calculator. And we'll just run some numbers and see what we come up with. Already run some numbers here. We're just playing with numbers. Oh, I feel like I missed something that I was going, oh no, I haven't gotten there yet. I was going to introduce myself and then I put a bunch of stuff in front of it. Okay, I'll introduce myself in a few minutes then. We'll play with numbers first because it's fun. So here we are, handy calculator. I took the $7,000 amount and divided it by 12. Okay, I didn't put in the 33 cents, but you end up investing 583 per month if you did it monthly. Now, some people will plop in once a year. I don't like plopping it in once per year. I don't know if anybody could figure out why that is. I don't like plopping it in once a year because you have timing risk there. You don't know if the market's going up or going down, but the larger lump sum that you put in, the more you might stand to lose if the market suddenly goes down. And I'm a fan of dollar cost averaging, which for most people, that means putting money in once per month, although really it could be on any regular basis. I guess you could say once per year could be dollar cost averaging, um, but I just had a client recently and she was advised to, put money in her Roth. And so she just took the maximum amount and put it in. And almost instantly she was, down a little bit of money. She was, down a couple of percentage points. And she really didn't like that. Like, she's used to saving, she's not used to investing. And there's something that happens in our nervous system. You kind of hit that panic button, and maybe she was only down, 50, 60, $70. But when people get down hundreds, when they get down thousands, then sometimes there is this temptation to sell. Like, I don't like this. I'm going to get out. How low is this going to go? And traditionally, there's lots of evidence that us emotional creatures tend to buy and sell at all the wrong times, as smart as we may think that we are. So, dollar cost averaging, which is simply putting money in every month automatically, maybe on the same day every month. It could happen manually, but happening automatically, I think is great because then we don't second guess ourselves, and then it can be kind of a set it and forget it thing, and it helps eliminate some of that risk. So I put in a starting amount and 20 years, I put in a return rate of 8%. Now, if you're investing in conservative mutual funds, 8% is probably aggressive. If you look at the historical returns of the S&P 500, or especially something like the NASDAQ 100, which is largely tech stocks, 8% looks conservative because S&P 500 historically is typically about 10%, sometimes a little more than 10%. We've had a really good run lately, since the global financial crisis. And so you'll see with these numbers, and I just ran it over 20 years, but we'll play with the numbers. But you end up with $334,000. Wow. Okay, that's kind of cool. Um, I put in the 20 years. I know I've got somebody on the call who's already at retirement age, although she is still working and contributing and plans to live a long time. But, maybe her trajectory, it might not be 40 years. It might be, 20, 25, 30 years, something like that. Maybe more, but we never know. And so I'm kind of pointing out that it could, if you already had, the income that you needed and the safe, conservative investments that you needed to know that you that you were fine in terms of retirement income, like it could be a fun thing to move over some income into a Roth every year and just see what happens. So you can see here total contributions 139.20 and total interest 193,940. So there's more in interest if you had just put it in a cardboard box, a shoe box. Hopefully that's not your investment strategy, but if you would put it in a cardboard box, you would have 139. Like let's say that we kept it in just like savings. And I know the rate of savings goes up and down, but I think over the last number of years, I'm just going to put in 3% as sort of like an average savings rate. So if you were being really conservative and you were adding this money into a savings account that over the years averaged 3%, then instead of 334, we're going to look at 191. Wow. See how that goes down? So that return rate is really important. And of course, there are no guarantees. Well, unless there are guarantees, you could be putting the money into something that did have a guaranteed return. Maybe it's a treasury bond or something like that. And I think T-bonds these days, I think you're earning over 4%. If we did 4.5%. We get 225. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's say that it's in the S&P 500 that you're willing to take that risk. And by the way, the only guarantee that I tell people who invest in the stock market is that you will lose money. If you invest in the stock market, you just be prepared. You're going to lose money, and there's virtually no way to stop it. Yeah, unless you just put a sell order if anything goes down, but good luck with that. But we say 10%, 422. Wow. Okay. That looks pretty cool. NASDAQ's done better than 12% lately. It's done actually quite a bit better than 12% lately, but I'm not going to put in any numbers over 12 because that just seems completely irresponsible. 12%, we see it go to 536. Ah, that's pretty incredible. Like, let's say I'm going to take it back down to 8%. Let's say you've got a longer time horizon. George might be watching the replay. Our friend George he's younger than the rest of us, in his, I think, young 30s. Let's say that George put it in his young 30s and he left it in for the next 40 years. And actually, I'm going to just run this again to compare 20 years at 8%, 334. What if we go 40 years? It's not going to just double. If we just doubled that 334, we're going to get to, what is that, 668, 669, but we're going to end up with, wow, what, even I'm surprised, 1,890 $1,000, 554 and 65 cents. And I didn't even put in that extra 33 cents per month. So pretty impressive. And this is nothing crazy here. This is just simply following what the Roth IRA gives us the ability to do. Now, there are people out there who say, I don't know that I really trust the government. Can we trust that the Roth IRA is never going to be taxed? I think when it started, the contribution limits were higher, and some people, like famously Mitt Romney, ended up making just a huge mint off of his Roth IRA. And then the government kind of went, wait. No, we just lost out on a whole bunch of taxes. And they clamped down and they put these limits on it. So, the fact that the limits are so low, and also the fact that you do have savvy, wealthy people who are using these Roth IRAs, and I'll show you actually how you can put in more than that minimum. It's not that hard to do. So you can, yes, but but so back to the question of, do I think the government's going to tax these? And I really don't. I think the government tends to take care of its donors. Do you know what I mean? The government wants to keep the donors happy. The donors would be unhappy if all of a sudden they were taxed on their Roth IRAs. And it would also just go against, like, that agreement, that contract of because they already paid taxes on the money. Not that the government minds taxing us twice or, three times over for the same dollars. But I don't think we're going to see that. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sharing anything now, am I? No, I'm gonna go back to sharing my notes. Roth Riches, here we go. So we played with the calculator, and I think a pretty fun goal would be, can we add, if you're in your 30s or 40s, you could add $1 million to your future retirement income with a Roth, and you might be doing all kinds of other things as well. You might have a brokerage account, you might have a 401k, you might be doing, who knows, buying some gold, some silver, some Bitcoin, some, real estate. So it's not necessarily going to be the only, matter of fact, I would not necessarily recommend it being the only thing that you do, but it could be a very worthwhile. And even if you were investing in other places, even if you were just putting in half or putting in a fraction, a couple $100 per month, you can end up with an extra six figures, depending on the rate that you earn and how long you put that money there. So a fun goal, I think, for somebody, especially of my age, I would say would be, can I add an extra six figures of tax-free income to my future retirement savings? I think that's a fun goal. Yes. So we played with the numbers. Here's what I'm covering today, besides what I've already covered, why the Roth, and you're starting to see these reasons. I'm going to give you some more advantages, especially also a few of the disadvantages, just things to be aware of. Not every not every financial vehicle is the be all end all. Not every financial vehicle is perfect for everybody. I like the Roth IRA because if you have the ability to contribute, and pretty soon here I'll go through who can and who can't, because not everybody can contribute to a Roth IRA. I just think the upsides are so good that even if it's an extra $100 a month, like, put it in there. Just think of all the things that we prioritize money on, and this is just a fun, even if it's not your main, even if you're already retired, I think it can be, well, if you're already completely retired, as you'll see, you're not going to be able uh, to do it, because you do need to have earned income. But we'll look at the advantages, the disadvantages, a little bit of history, some couple of Roth fortunes, containers versus investments. Oh my goodness. There's a sad lesson some people have learned investing in their IRAs. You won't make that mistake. What you can invest in within that, we'll look at typical Roth IRAs versus the self-directed Roth IRAs, which also are known or abbreviated as SDIRA, self-directed IRA, some common questions about Roth IRAs. All of this, by the way, is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't give people financial advice. What I do is I educate people and I coach them to look through the pros and the cons, and whether they're using logic, their own research, maybe even talking to other experts or advisors, tapping into your intuition. I think all of these are valid ways to make financial decisions. And I'm such a fan of people being confident in their financial decisions. And why this class? Why am I doing this class? Who the heck am I anyway? Why Roth Riches? I'm Kate Phillips of Total Wealth, and I love, as I said, coaching and educating people on money and also on prosperity, on abundance. And I've done, right now, I have a wealth alignment circle, a women's group. I've done a course as well several times that I've offered called Rewrite My Money Story. In those classes, we don't talk about finances at all. It's really more how do our belief systems, our personal growth, how does that impact our money? Because when we have those personal and those mindset breakthroughs, that is when we tend to have the financial breakthroughs as well. And matter of fact, this month, February 2025, we're going to be doing a money belief breakthrough in the Wealth Alignment Circle, which is one of my favorite workshops. So I am a financial author. I brought bragging objects today, which I don't always have handy, but I looked over on my kitchen counter, which has too much stuff on it. And I'm like, look at all those books. I got to show them all. I don't know if this is forwards or backwards, who knows, but Perpetual Wealth is a book I co-wrote. I did the writing, but my co-author Kim contributed a lot of ideas. She is a life insurance expert, and I did all kinds of research. This is all about generational wealth, and I've had amazing feedback. We have a lot of 5-star reviews on Amazon. It's a meaty book about generational wealth, also about how to implement specifically whole life insurance in generational wealth. But there's so much, it completely changed my mindset about a lot of things of generational wealth. Like, oh, I get it now. Just the research that I did, things were not as I believed in terms of what really, it's largely a study of how families build wealth and then how it's lost and what we do to keep ourselves, to keep our families from losing it. Because there's this idea going around that if you just build enough wealth, it's going to last for generations. And I'm here to tell you, and there's lots of historical evidence to prove that you cannot make enough money for it to last for generations. If the future generations do not learn to save, to manage, to invest for themselves, they are going to go through it like the Vanderbilts did, which was quite quickly. Most of the Vanderbilts, there were many other precedents as well. I wrote a chapter in Live Your Life Insurance and edited that. I helped Kim put out a updated, expanded, and revised version of that. And that is one of the most popular books on Amazon about whole life insurance. I also edited Busting the Retirement Lies, which Kim Butler wrote, Kim D.H. Butler. I edited Busting the Interest Rate Lies, which is a story, and James Ranson, a writer, helped Kim and her friend Jack Burns write Busting the Life Insurance Lies, and I also made some contributions to that book as well. And I actually offer a very short little 22-page mini ebook called Breakthrough to Abundance, The 4 Reasons You're Stressing Over Money and How to Break the Cycle Forever. And I helped Kim write a little ebook as well that she used to actually attract a lot of different clients. So I love books for all kinds of reasons and have contributed to a lot of financial books. And my pet peeve, I just realized I was showing off my books while I was little tiny on the screen. Oh well, I'm not going to do that again. Um, my pet peeve is to see women handing over their power and their dollars to others. When I hear a woman when I say, oh yeah, I help women learn to invest, and oh, well, my husband takes care of that for me. My financial advisor takes care of that for me. Usually it's, I've got a guy and the guy takes care of that for me. I don't like to hear that. And the other thing, and they're tied together, that I really don't like to hear, that I really don't like to see, is when people are sold something they don't understand. And just earlier this week, one of my many thousands of Facebook friends, a woman who I don't personally know, but I know her on Facebook. And yeah, she is younger and does not have children, and somebody's selling her a big life insurance policy, and a type of life insurance policy that there's not a great history around it, and there's a lot of lawsuits around it. And I just thought that's what happens when women, when any of us, you can, it definitely happens to men as well, when we get financial advice from people who are selling us things and we don't have a framework, we don't have a basis to understand different asset classes or the risks or the pros and the cons. That's why I consider myself a wealth educator. I think we should all be learning from people who they don't stand to gain or lose a big commission, depending on what. It doesn't mean we don't sometimes work with commissioned people, doesn't mean that salespeople are bad, none of that. But it's just not the best way to get financial advice, because it is unavoidably biased when we are talking with someone that their entire living, stems from selling a particular product. They're going to be well educated. I was well educated as a realtor of what happened in 2008, 2007, 2008, when we saw property prices crash. All of my properties lost like 45%. And my realtor brain did not believe that was possible. I wasn't trying to be biased. I just was biased because I was well educated to believe in real estate being the absolute best investment and to not be open to those kinds of losses. So just because something is popular doesn't mean it's good, and it doesn't mean it's right for you. Yeah. And I think a prime example of doesn't mean it's good just because something is popular, and this relates to IRAs. It's my least favorite investment, one of my least favorite investments, and one of the most popular ones. It's the target date funds. When we get to what you can invest in, I should say more about the target date funds, which I like to refer to as financial sausage. That's not a compliment. That's like not the highest grade hot dogs you can. So I like Roth IRAs. I'm not the biggest fan of 401ks, because they tend to be inefficient. The costs tend to be high. You know, the employer's got to hire a company, and the company is administrating that. And typically there are layers of fees. There's maybe an annual fee, there's going to be like a management fee that is almost always over 1%, and then they are almost always guiding you into mutual funds, and there's fees within those funds as well. So if you're in a 401k, you kind of have to figure that you're probably paying a total of about 2%, even if it doesn't look like on the surface you're paying that. Probably paying about 2% in fees, which just causes a huge drag on the your investment return. So there's limited investment choices. As I said, you're usually working with a company, and they give you a choice of, various, sometimes bond funds, sometimes some balanced funds, a lot of mutual funds that have stocks in them. Typically, you can't invest in individual stocks. Whether you want to or not is another question. But also index funds, you might not have access to something that would be low cost, such as index funds. I like Kim Butler's advice on 401ks, which is invest to the match, not to the max. So if you work for an employer and that employer is giving you like, hey, if you invest pretty typically up to 3%, sometimes 5%, sometimes more, sometimes less. If you invest up to 3% of your income, I will match that 3%. If you're making $100,000 per year, I will match up to $3,000 per year of what you are putting in to your 401k. And why Kim says invest to the match and not the max is for those other reasons, that the 401ks are not terribly efficient. Your investment choices are limited. So take advantage of that match. When somebody offers you free money, the correct answer is yes, please, and thank you. And then once that match is taken care of, it may make sense to invest elsewhere, really depending on some things. If you are a high income earner at that particular point in time, it might make sense to max out your 401k, because it may be that you're in a high tax bracket and that is the way to avoid the tax bracket. And then, as I'll show you, you can move money into a Roth IRA later. Why a Roth? Well, you get to create tax-free income for life. Who doesn't love that? No income taxes. There's no federal income tax, no earned income tax on the withdrawals. By the way, earned income tax is what you would pay for if you're pulling money out of a traditional IRA or 401k. There's no state tax in almost all states. I really tried to Google this for you, and the internet, sometimes it lies to you. It wouldn't give me a consistent result. So my best advice is check with an accountant. But states under question where I would really be looking: New Jersey, MS, is that Mississippi? I think that's Mississippi, and MI would be Missouri. That's what I think they are. I need to go back to school and test my states. No capital, there's also no capital gains tax. So not only your withdrawals are not taxed, you've already paid tax before you put that money into the account. And no matter how large that account gets, there's no capital gains tax on the profits. And the internet does sometimes lie to you. And, I did a lot of Googling and I was like, and right now AI is like giving us these answers, and, you know, there's misinformation about all kinds of things on the internet, and AI is sometimes spitting those out. So I noticed that sometimes the answers I was getting had to do with traditional IRAs and not with Roths. So, like I Google specifically told me that nope, if you put Bitcoin in an IRA, oh nope, that's considered an asset and you're gonna have to pay. It said this about a Roth IRA, you're gonna have to pay capital gains tax. So I did some more poking around, and that was not true. Roth versus traditional. So I'm going to be a little bit repetitive here because I think it doesn't always hurt to review. Traditional IRA, tax deduction now, pay taxes later. Roth IRA, pay taxes now, no taxes later. Your total, you're going to lower, we're looking at advantages, lower your total taxes in retirement. And a source of tax-free income can be really important if your other income sources in retirement are taxable. So if you've got, a sizable traditional 401k or IRA, it's especially nice to have some income that won't be taxed. And so if you need to pull extra money out, you need to pull a lump sum out. Spending assets in the best sequence can reduce your overall tax burden. It's really interesting to see when people are using special retirement calculators and software of when you sequence your withdrawal sequence, where you're getting your income from in certain order, it makes a difference in the total income you will have in your retirement. What people tend to do is take a little from everything. In other words, if people have like, I've got whole life insurance and I've got, a traditional IRA and I've got my Roth IRA and I'm just going to pull a little bit of money out of each thing. And actually, the most efficient way is to spend your taxable income first. When you spend your taxable income first, again, please do, use retirement software, consult a planner. Don't take this to the bank. But experiment with that idea, because that can be a way that you maximize your retirement income, is to spend down the taxable income first, and then you don't have that drag. Meanwhile, you're letting things like your Roth IRA grow while you're spending your taxable income. Because part of that whole tax trap, it used to be more common when people retired, they would just take their retirement money and they would go invest it in whatever they were going to invest it in for their retirement, which might be an annuity, it might be real estate, it might be, stocks, bonds, etc. But now, and partly this is one of the things I don't love about those uh, target date funds. They're also called Lifecycle funds. It's the funds where everything's all wrapped up like a sausage. And if you're going to retire around the year 2050, you go and you find a fund, the Financial Freedom 2050 fund, by whatever the brokerage company is. And the whole idea, when you want to keep that monkey, you want to, the people the Wall Street folks who are earning, they're earning income, they're earning commissions, fees on assets under management, AUM. That's how they earn their money. They would like your money to stay invested with them for a very long time. So rather than money in different asset classes, where some of them might not even be, subject to taxes, they're going to roll it all into a sausage. And that sausage, the target date sausage, is going to change over time. It's going to have less stocks and more bonds, a little less risk and a little more income focused. And they want to keep charging whatever their management fee is. I think Edward Jones, you're going to be looking, depending on how much you invest, it could be 1.5%, it might be 1% if you have more money invested. But they want to keep collecting that money from you. And that's one of the ways that they do it, is we're going to just put everything into this sausage. And it's just not, especially when you get down to your later years, and maybe you're being very conservative and maybe your money's only earning, 4% per year. If you're paying 1% or 1.5% on that 4% gain, it's not good. You're giving, if you're paying 1 point, yeah, I'm not going to do the math fast enough in my head, but you might be surrendering something like 25% of your gains each year to your manager, money manager. Yeah. But the Roth IRAs gives you flexibility in retirement spending. They help in managing your tax bracket by giving you tax-free withdrawals when you need extra income. Another question to ask: would you rather pay taxes on the seed or on the harvest? When you pay taxes on the seed, you're paying taxes on the contributions. As we saw over time, those contributions might be doubled, tripled, quadrupled, and more, depending on how long you stay invested, what rate you earn. And so when you are paying taxes on the harvest, you could be paying a lot more in taxes. But I like the idea of enjoying a tax-free harvest. Actually, even more than enjoying a tax-free harvest, I would say, would be to have that option. I can argue that having both a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA could be a great idea. And there could be years where you're like, oh, like this is a high income year for me, and I'm going to invest, I'm going to put all my investments in that traditional IRA because I'm going to take advantage of the tax break. And there are other years where you're like, I didn't really make very much. I'm going to plug money into my Roth. If you were a farmer, would you rather pay taxes on your penny seeds or your $1 million harvest? Just kind of a visual here. Seeds versus harvest. Pay taxes on the seeds. You reduce the total tax burden, no taxes at retirement. And you're paying taxes at today's rate, which is a known rate, whether you think it's high or whether you think it's low, it's a known rate. When you pay taxes on the future harvest, it could be well, probably is an increased tax burden because hopefully your investments are growing over time. Taxes are delayed until retirement. You're paying taxes at a future unknown and perhaps higher tax rate. And then also, you're going to be dealing with required minimum distributions when you hit, they've just raised it. Now, I think it's 73. Maybe it's been 73 for a while. I think it maybe used to be a little bit younger, but you're going to pay those required minimum distributions when you hit that age. So even if you don't need the money in a traditional IRA, you're going to have to take the money because Uncle Sam wants his money. He doesn't want you to just sit there and let it grow. He wants his tax dollars. So you are protecting against future tax increases when you invest in a Roth with after tax dollars. Do you think taxes are going up or down? I don't know. I would say I usually have been guessing up because our national debt has gotten so incredibly out of control. Right now, people's heads are exploding because of what's going on with Doge and Elon Musk and all kinds of moves going on there. And there are radically different interpretations as to whether we're having a coup right now or whether there is a long-standing coup and the coup is being ended. And I would say for many years, not just for the last 4 years, although I think it got worse during the last 4 years, I would say for many years throughout several administrations, we have really seen our tax dollars. It's almost like a collection of money laundering schemes that the government has. War is a money laundering scheme, I would say. There's so much money laundering going on in Ukraine. It was going on in Afghanistan. It's insane. There during and I would say money laundering or fraud, just any kind of fraud during COVID. Estimates range between 400 billion and $1 trillion on how much money was lost to fraud during the COVID years. And you can't tell me some of that wasn't like well planned and intentional. Oops, oh, we just accidentally paid like a whole bunch of people like unemployment benefits, even though they like died a year ago. And oops, we accidentally gave a bunch of money to businesses that weren't really businesses, or that maybe they didn't even really exist. Like there was just so much fraud going on. And yeah, so there I could go on, but I won't about the examples of fraud that we see. It's not good. It's not good. So yeah. So whether that's being cleaned up or whether the Treasury is being cleaned out, we will wait and see. I do not think the Treasury is being cleaned out at this time. Yeah, that's what I believe, but I understand people have strong opinions about this. Long-term tax-free growth. This is the other way that you protect against future taxes. If you're really successful with these investments, then you could end up with a really big tax bill. So your contributions grow tax-free, withdrawals are not subject to income tax. And let's look at some folks who have done really well with their investments. Let's see. I've got this here somewhere. There we go. Kind of fun to share some things from the internet. Peter Thiel, Mitt Romney, I mentioned. Well, Mitt Romney did really well. We'll start with him. He grew his IRA to $100 million, tax-free and legally. Hmm. That's a lot of tax-free money. Like I said, I think it was after Mitt when the government was like, no, we're not letting people put that much money into these Roth IRAs. And so he made a fortune buying companies. He was, investing in startups. If you invest in startups and if you know what you are doing, that money can really, really grow. And he was a private equity investor with Bain Capital before entering politics. I think the person who has made the best use out of a Roth IRA is Peter Thiel, investor, entrepreneur. He grew his Roth IRA from $2,000 to over $5 billion. My brain has a hard time comprehending these numbers here, 22, 23 years. He grew his IRA tax-free, $5 billion. You'd think with $5 billion, he could afford to pay some taxes for sure. but, doesn't have to. He invested his portfolio and bought shares of stock that he thought would do well. I'm positive he was also investing in startups. And one of his strategies include placing PayPal shares. He was one of the co-founders of PayPal shares in this account in 1999 when it was a private company. And ProPublica says he made an end run around the rules. Okay, I know nothing about that, but I would just say that that's a pretty darn good job there of taking advantage of that. Okay, I'm back to my notes. Feel free to let me know if there's questions coming up in the meantime. Don't think I see anything in the chat. Feel free to yell out if there's something in the chat that I'm not seeing. Flexibility for major expenses. This is something I did not appreciate until recently when an acquaintance of mine told me a story about buying a home, and she is retired or at least semi-retired, and she needed, like a pretty sizable down payment to buy this home, and she took it out of her traditional retirement account, and she got hit with a huge tax bill. And I think she pulled, probably, I don't even think it was like your typical 10 or 20%. I think it was even a larger down payment than that, because she wanted to make sure that her payments, her housing payments, would be very reasonable, and she got hit with this very high tax bill and was kind of blindsided with that. And that is exactly what will happen if you ever need or want to pull a big lump sum out of a traditional retirement account. You can retire, of course, tax-free, penalty-free at any time, penalty-free, presuming that you've had that account for 5 years, or you can even pull out a lump sum before you've had that account for 5 years and before you're 59 and a half. But you will only be able to pull out the money that you've put in, your contribution amount. Earned income. Is there a limited percentage that can be put into a Roth? No, you can put in, it doesn't matter if you're earning $8,000, you can put $8,000 into a Roth. So I think it would be limited to the amount of income that you were making if somebody was earning less than that. But yeah, all of that could go into a Roth. And because it's an IRA, an individual retirement account, it's not linked to any kind of employer. So if you are claiming, in other words, you can have, and I think I'm going to get there in just a moment. Um, Yes. Oh, what a great point. I didn't even have that in my notes. Yes, you have until April 15th to create a Roth for the previous calendar year. So yes, you unfortunately don't get a tax break, but you would on a traditional IRA if somebody's looking to save money on taxes. But yes, you have until April 15th to create a Roth for the previous year. Yeah. And then actually, I don't even think you have to claim the traditional IRA, but I'm trying to think back if the IRS even knows when I have put money into a Roth, and I don't actually remember the answer. I should know that, but I don't. Um, yes. So you can, if you have emergencies come up, or maybe there's just a major purchase, the down payment for the property or tuition payment for a kid, trip around the world, whatever it is that you are spending a large amount of money on, you don't want to be pulling big lump sums if you can help it out of your traditional IRA. So you avoid that big tax bill. Another advantage, more control and lower costs compared to 401k. Here, I'm really talking about when you have a 401k, you or with your Roth IRA, you have an nearly endless choice of investments, almost endless. You can invest for almost no cost. In other words, you're not paying that management fee. You don't have to buy mutual funds that might have fees baked into them. So you're going to be able to invest a lot more efficiently than if it was a 401k. You can use virtually any brokerage, and I say virtually because not every not every brokerage offers, but almost any brokerage. I know when I started investing, it was in Robinhood, and at that point in time, they did not offer Roth IRAs, and I'm quite certain they do now because I was looking at that and looking at maybe starting a new Roth IRA because I like the app. I know you could move money over as well, but if you want, you could also just simply start a new Roth IRA. You can manage them yourself. One idea that is an interesting idea is certainly having financial advice is a good and valuable thing. And you might have a financial advisor who manages your traditional accounts. But you could still start a Roth IRA on the side, open up your own account and save yourself that money and still have access to the person who's answering questions and giving you some advice. You want to put your fastest horse in the Roth. You know what? I'm going to save that conversation for when we look at the things that you can put in the Roth because it's an interesting idea. And it's why if you had an account that wasn't where you weren't paying that management fee, you would want it to be the Roth because you want to take the biggest advantage you can out of growing tax-free income. There's no employer needed. This is cool. More freedom, less rules. There's just more rules around 401ks. With a 401k, as I mentioned, you're limited to the investment options offered by your employer's plan. You're limited in when you can take the money and how much you can take the money and when you have to take the money, the required minimum distributions, while a Roth IRA, it just gives you more flexibility to both choose investments and make decisions about that money because Uncle Sam's like, it's not my money anymore. Okay, I guess you get to do with it what you want because Uncle Sam can be a little bit of a control freak, but it's like, not his money. He's not going to make any money off of it. It's more flexible than the traditional IRA. With this 5-year rule, you don't even have to wait till you're 59 and a half to withdraw that money. You can withdraw after 5 years, and even before then, you can withdraw before 5 years. you can withdraw up to the contributions. There's no penalty or tax in doing so, even if you're not 59 and a half. So in that way, it really can function as sort of like a backup emergency fund. And, the downside of using a Roth IRA as an emergency fund is that sometimes you're going to have a bad year. You're going to lose money if you are invested in something like stocks. And so, emergency funds typically are in savings accounts, they are in savings vehicle or cash equivalents where we don't have the possibility of losing that. Additional Roth IRA benefits, very low minimums. Most brokerages are going to let you invest $50 or less. It could be $5, it could be $10. Literally, you could invest $10 a month into your Roth IRA. Now you're not going to get you're not going to get to $1 million, unless maybe you're Peter Thiel and you own the next PayPal. But yeah, you can invest not as much as you want, but you can invest as little as you want. But definitely that's something you'll want to look at when you're looking at different brokerages. You can automate your investments. Great for dividend investing, great for index fund investing. I really like index fund investing for Roth IRAs because it is going to be your faster horse. However, you might say, I don't have the risk tolerance, or at my age, I don't want to be doing index fund investing, because you can look at the history of index funds and say, wow, when that S&P 500 crashed 40 or 50%, count me out of that kind of risk. And doing dividend stocks, they just don't, they're not as volatile as index funds. So that could be one way. You could also do your own version of, balanced. You can create your own, or buy into a balanced fund that is going to not be all in stocks. Very popular for DIY investors, Roth IRAs. As I think I already mentioned this, no required minimum distributions. There's estate planning advantages. Kim used to say that an IRA is the worst asset to die with because it's not an efficient asset to pass on, whether you would like to leave money for charity, whether you have beneficiaries or children that you are leaving money to. It's not an efficient way to pass taxes on, to pass assets on to heirs, because your heirs are going to pay taxes when they pull the money out. And if your heirs are, maybe they're younger and they're working, then it could be a lot of money. Now, I think charities can step around this. So maybe erase that comment about the charities, that it might not matter to them. They're also going to be most people are going to be forced to pull their money out to completely liquidate that within 10 years. This was a fairly recent update to the tax code. Liquidate within 10 years. Unless it is a spouse. If you are leaving, there's a couple other exceptions to it that are a little more rare, but the most popular exception is if you're leaving this to a spouse, then they can take their time. We used to call this a stretch IRA. When you had an IRA and you wanted to stretch it out as long as possible, pulling just a little bit out every year over decades so that you pay the least amount of taxes possible. And then the IRA said, nope, I want my money faster. The IRS said, I want my money faster. And they took away that ability for most heirs to do that. But with the Roth IRA, they can take their time because there's no taxes on it. You don't have an heir, a niece or a nephew or a grandchild who's going to end up with a big tax bill because you already paid the taxes on that. Yes. So for estate planning, for estate planning purposes, Roth IRA is way better than a traditional IRA. Heirs can be forced to withdraw and takes that tax hit. And they offer you flexibility in financial planning. I know in the retirement revival, we talked about tax planning. A tax planner, usually you go perhaps to an accountant who's going to tell you how to save money this year and your taxes. Some accountants are also going to look to the future. But when we talked about tax planning or a tax planner, their goal is to save you over not just this year, but to look ahead and say, how are you going to save money in the future? And having a diversified tax strategy, whereas some of your assets are taxable, some are tax deferred. Oops, didn't mean to do that. And some are tax free. You've got all of those. Then according to your income that year, according to how much money you are pulling out, you can choose, or according to whether the stock market is up or down, you can choose where you pull those money and pull the money out of for your income. And that is really what is smart. You probably are going to have some things, hopefully, that are more conservative if you are already retired, things that are not going to be subject to the big market ups and downs. Maybe you've got some annuities, maybe you've got some treasury bonds, those kinds of things. And when you have those steady things that you can pull income from, then when the stock market takes a hit, you don't pull from the stock market. You just let it ride, knowing that in another 2 or 3 years, it's going to bounce back, or at least start to bounce back. And you might even want to continue to contribute or even maximize your contributions. If it looks like, wow, we saw the stock market dive down in 2008. And, if stocks are down 40, I think they went down about 42% in the S&P 500, that's a great time to be buying more of those shares. Yeah. So who can contribute? You must have earned income, as I mentioned. Social Security does not count. Investment income does not count. Self-employment, okay. Contract work, okay. A spouse's income, interestingly, does count. So that is the one exception to not having earned income. A spouse can start a Roth IRA for themselves, and they can start one for their spouse as well. And they can contribute, up to those maximums in either or both accounts. It's called a spousal Roth IRA. It's a retirement account that allows a working spouse to contribute to a Roth IRA for their non-working spouse. It's a way for couples to save for retirement, even if only one spouse works. Now, there is income eligibility as well. And I think this font looks smaller here. See if it is. I want to make sure. I know sometimes it's hard to see on the replays. So, yeah, income eligibility. As I mentioned, there's limitations to who can invest in a Roth IRA. There's also a workaround. So, income limits. This restricts high income earners from contributing directly. In 2025, these income limits are $150,000 or less for single filers, or $236,000 for married couples filing jointly. I believe that there is a bit of a stair step. It's not an all or nothing thing. This would be definitely something to talk to a tax expert and accountant about if you are close to or even over those amounts, to see how that might be impacted. With a traditional IRA, there's no income limits. You can always invest in a traditional IRA. But however, the tax deductibility may phase out at higher incomes if covered by a retirement plan at work. The tax deductibility they phase out at higher incomes. Okay, I'm getting my head. I know I wrote that. Let's go on. What if you make too much to contribute? There is what we call the backdoor IRA. And it almost honestly seems silly that we have the limits, because it's like, okay, I'll just do it next year. I'll do it down the road. You didn't let me. I can only put my $7,000 in. I can only put my $8,000 in if you're 50 or over. But down the road, at any time you choose, you can move as much as you want from your traditional IRA into your backdoor. It's not technically, it's just called a Roth IRA. Just the backdoor is the nickname that it has. Um, because we know that you're moving it from an existing traditional IRA rather than, making your contributions of maximum $7,000 or $8,000 per year. Now there's a big mistake you want to avoid. Don't get carried away. If you go online and you're just learning about Roth IRAs online, and everybody's like, yeah, the Roth is really awesome. And you're like, cool. I saw that somebody got really excited and they liquidated they just moved over their entire traditional IRA, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Guess what happened next? Big, fat, huge tax bill, like 80,000 or more tax bill. Very sad. So they could have stopped that, prevented that from happening by just moving over a bit at a time, or just moving money over when you're having a low income year. If you're used to making six figures and all of a sudden you got a year where you're only making $50,000, but you've got savings you can totally afford, or maybe you're paying the taxes out of the money that you are moving over. I hope that makes sense, that yes, you can move over as much as you want as long as you've got that earned income, but do not get carried away. Do not move everything all at once, or you'll get hit with that big tax bill. So always be aware of the potential tax implications of making large conversions. Let's see, where am I? Am I back to, I think this is, yeah, I think this was maybe just part of the advantages. Great for dollar cost averaging. The strategy lowers risks and can be easily automated. I think I already went over that, just some notes that didn't get moved. There's some more points, 401ks versus IRAs, just to kind of solidify. Your 401k has higher annual contribution limits. But as I mentioned earlier, if you invest to the match and not to the max, then you might be putting some of that money into an IRA or a Roth IRA instead. So it's more efficient. Your IRA has lower annual contribution limits, and this is the same whether it's a traditional or a Roth IRA. That $7,000, $8,000 limit applies. A 401k is employee sponsored, and there's going to be employer contributions, at least hopefully, and they may include matching contributions. IRA, it's not sponsored by an employer. There's no matching. Contributions are entirely personal. And some more differences here. I'm just talking about IRAs, traditional versus Roth. I'm not talking about 401ks at all anymore. Again, it's the tax treatment is the big difference, and also the taxation on your withdrawals, the required minimum distributions. I'm realizing this is completely repeated. Early withdrawal flexibility. I think I've mentioned all of those things, but it doesn't hurt to say them twice. Any questions, ahas right at the moment while I put on some chapstick? I am feeling a break Feeling a break coming on. I think it is time. It's time for a short break, a little I think I'm gonna give 8 minutes for a break. I'm gonna stop the recording, give 8 minutes for the break. Um, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about what to put in the IRA, what you can invest in. I'll talk about the self-directed IRAs. I said this was gonna be less than 2 hours, but now I might be doubting myself. And we're going to start with a very important conversation of containers versus investments or buckets. We might think about buckets versus investments. And I'm going to give you another really big mistake to absolutely avoid. That unfortunately, a lot of people are now confessing online that they have made this mistake. It's the problem when we kind of learn just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be effective at what we're doing. And some might say my financial advisor friends or, professionals in the business would say, well, I could have saved that person from doing that. So it is the risk when we do the do it yourself thing that sometimes we make stupid mistakes that we have to learn from. So I'll give you that next mistake to definitely avoid when we come back in 8 minutes. That's going to be 36 after. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording, which means I have to start it back up again.